I should have stopped scrolling. I've always been a curious person. I think most people who find themselves down these internet rabbit holes are. I mean, who wouldn't want to uncover something new? Something no one else knows about? Something hidden deep in the recesses of the web, untouched by the prying eyes of ordinary browsers? It started innocently enough, just one late-night binge of unusual internet stories, the kind that show up on your feed when the algorithm thinks you've reached the depths of your curiosity. The usual creepy threads, the weird memes, the unsettling photos of abandoned places. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, I stumbled across a forum post titled, "The Watchers of the Unseen." I can't explain why, but the title hooked me instantly. There was something wrong about it, but I clicked anyway. The post was a series of cryptic messages, most of which seemed nonsensical. A jumbled mess of random thoughts, pictures of unfamiliar landscapes, and eerie black and white images of old decaying homes. But there was a pattern, words repeating themselves, symbols hidden in plain sight, a name, a place, a date. It didn't take long for me to realize the patterns weren't random. The more I dug, the more the message became clear. The watchers were real, and they had been watching people like me for years. But they weren't just watching. They were waiting for something. I thought it was all just a sick joke, some twisted form of internet art. I thought that maybe I was just reading too much into it, but then I found the link. The link was buried at the bottom of the post, hidden in a strange combination of letters and numbers that almost looked like a URL, but not quite. Something about it pulled me in some primal need to click, to go further, to see what I wasn't supposed to see. I clicked it. The page loaded slowly, and when it finally did, I froze. It was a live feed. A grainy black and white camera pointed at an empty street corner, dimly lit by a flickering streetlight. Nothing moved, nothing at all. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. The sound was faint, but they're almost imperceptible. A soft, rhythmic tapping noise, like someone was gently knocking on a door, but there were no doors in sight. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I told myself it was just some elaborate hoax, a prank, maybe some deepfake or an AI-generated feed. I closed the tab and tried to distract myself, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing the image of that empty street corner in my mind. The tapping noise echoed in the silence of my room. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next night, I went back. The page was still there, the same feed, the same tapping sound. But now, something was different. A figure had appeared, just at the edge of the frame. At first, I thought it was a shadow. But Noit was watching me. I could feel its eyes, even through the screen. I don't know how long I stared at it. I should have closed the page, but my body wouldn't move. I wasn't sure what I was seeing anymore, if it was real or if I was just losing my mind. I looked closer, and the figure seemed to shift, move just a fraction. Then it raised its hand. I wanted to look away. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. The hand stretched out, fingers long and unnaturally thin, and it tapped the screen. Once, twice, 3 times, and then I heard a voice. A whisper, not through the speakers, not from anywhere near me. It was inside my head. I could feel it. "We see you. We've always seen you." I slammed my laptop shut, heart racing. But the voice didn't leave. It followed me into the silence of my room. I could feel it there, a presence. The air felt heavier. I glanced around. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed to stretch just a little too long. A faint tapping sound echoed from somewhere in the walls. I should have turned everything off. I should have stayed away from the internet, but I couldn't. The following days blurred together. The tapping never stopped. It came in waves, from places I couldn't explain. I began to see them shadows, flickers in the corner of my vision. Sometimes, just when I was about to close my eyes, I'd catch a glimpse of something in the dark. A figure, watching, waiting, always tapping. I started to fear opening my laptop. But even in my sleep, it was there. The images from that feed those empty streets, that figure in the shadows, followed me into my dreams. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. A week later, I found the post again. This time, it was different. It was a message, directed specifically at me. My name was there, typed out in all caps. "We've been waiting. You should have stayed away. Now you'll join us." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the world around me had changed, that I wasn't alone anymore. And then, that night, I heard it again. A knock at my door, soft at first, then louder. The tapping sound, clear and insistent. I don't know who or what is on the other side. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, if the madness is finally setting in. But when I went to check the live feed again, it was gone. The screen was blank, but a new message appeared, written in a language I didn't understand. Maybe I'll be okay. Maybe I'll wake up and all of this will just be a bad dream. But when the tapping comes again, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to ignore it. I think they're getting closer, and I'm not sure if I want to know what happens when they finally reach me. It's been weeks since it happened, but every time I try to think back, the memories twist into something that doesn't quite make sense. I don't know if it was real or if I lost my mind, but I need to tell someone. Maybe that'll help me make sense of it, if there's anyone left who can make sense of what happened. It started on a quiet evening. I was in a small, isolated cabin and escape from the chaos of city life. The kind of place you rent when you want to be alone. No neighbors, no distractions, just me, the wilderness, and my thoughts. I thought it would be peaceful, and for the first day or so, it was. But then the whispers began. I didn't hear them at first, not exactly. It was more like a sensation, a presence. It was the kind of feeling you get when you're being watched, but with a twist like something was in the room, just beyond the edge of your vision. At night, it would get worse. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the walls were closing in. I'd wake up at odd hours, heart pounding, breath shallow, as if someone had been standing by my bed, just out of reach. I told myself it was just the isolation getting to me. The mind plays tricks when you're alone in the woods, right? I tried to ignore it. I tried to stay busy. The cabin had no TV, no internet, but there was a stack of old books on a shelf. I picked one up and started reading one evening, hoping the distraction would calm my nerves. That's when I first noticed the odd thing about the pages. At first, I thought the book was just old. The edges of the pages were frayed. The words printed in that fading ink that makes everything look like a memory. But when I turned the page, something caught my eye, a word, scribbled hastily across the corner of the page. It wasn't in the book. It wasn't even in the same handwriting as the text. The word was whisper. I figured it was just some strange annotation, maybe a note from a previous owner. But as I turned more pages, the words started to repeat. Each page had one always the same word, always in a different place on the page. Whisper, whisper, whisper. I tossed the book aside. That's when I heard it. The whispering. It wasn't like before. It was real, clear, soft, but distinct. Come closer. It came from the direction of the woods. I couldn't make out the words at first, just that strange, distant sound, like something was calling me from the trees. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe an animal. But then, there it was again, right outside the cabin, soft and almost melodic. "Come closer." I froze. My heart thundered in my chest. I couldn't move. My instincts screamed at me to run, to leave, but my body didn't obey. It was like I was paralyzed, caught between fear and curiosity. The door to the cabin creaked open. I don't know how it happened. I know I hadn't opened it. But there it was, wide open, a faint draft pushing through the room, carrying the scent of earth and leaves. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Come closer." I stood there, rooted to the spot. The voice seemed to come from everywhere around me, inside me, through the walls. There was a pressure, like something was pressing down on me, suffocating me. And then I saw it. The figure in the doorway. It was barely a silhouette, tall and thin, standing just beyond the threshold of the cabin. I couldn't make out any features, just the dark outline of a person, but something was horribly wrong. The way it stood there, unmoving, watching me, it wasn't human. I could feel it in my bones. The whisper came again, but this time it was different. It was in my ear, so close I could feel the cold breath. "Come closer, we've been waiting." I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, my mind racing with panic and confusion. Then, without thinking, I bolted for the door. I didn't even look back. I just ran, straight into the night, heart pounding in my throat. The woods were dark, and the ground was uneven, but I didn't care. I couldn't get away fast enough. I don't remember how long I ran. I don't know how I found my way back to the cabin, but when I did, everything was different. The door was shut, locked. The windows were intact. The place looked untouched. It was like the thing in the doorway had never existed, except for the book. It was back on the shelf, opened to a new page. And on that page, right in the center, there was a new word: closer. I left the cabin that morning. I didn't look back. Now, I'm back home, in the city, trying to make sense of what happened. But I can't. I keep hearing it. The whispers. They're in my head now, echoing through my thoughts when I'm alone. I see them in my dreams, figures, standing in the dark, waiting for me to come closer. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear that voice again, soft and insistent, calling me from the woods. "Come closer." I don't know what it wants, and I'm terrified to find out. I still don't know how to explain what happened. Every time I try, the words feel too small, too simple, to capture what I experienced. But I can't ignore it anymore. I need to tell someone, even if they don't believe me, even if I sound crazy. It started a few months ago. I had moved into a new apartment, nothing special, just a small, affordable place on the edge of town. The kind of building that looked perfectly normal from the outside, with chipped paint on the windowsills and a cracked sidewalk. I didn't care much about the appearance. I was just happy to have a place to call my own. The first night was uneventful, the second too, but by the third night, something began to feel off. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't anything I could point to, but I felt a weight in the air, a pressure, like something was holding its breath, waiting. I started hearing things. At first, it was just faint noises, a knock at the door when no one was there, footsteps in the hallway, soft and measured, though the building was nearly empty. I convinced myself it was just the settling of an old building, maybe the neighbor upstairs moving around at odd hours. But then it got worse. One evening, I came home late from work. As I unlocked my apartment door, I heard it whispers, low and barely audible, coming from inside. At first, I thought maybe I'd left the TV on, but when I stepped inside, everything was silent. No TV, no radio, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the building settling. I shrugged it off as exhaustion. I was running on barely any sleep after all. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again clearer this time. A soft, rhythmic sound, like someone was tapping on the walls. I pulled the blankets over my head and tried to ignore it. But it wasn't just tapping. It was a pattern, a code, maybe, a beat. I didn't sleep much that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was just behind me, watching, listening, waiting. The next morning, the tapping stopped. I almost convinced myself it was a dream, but something inside me told me it wasn't. That evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find my apartment cold unnaturally so. The heat was on, but the air felt like ice. The whispers started again, quieter than before, almost like breathing. I looked around, half expecting to find someone in the apartment with me, but the place was empty. I sat on the couch, trying to calm my racing thoughts, but the whispering was becoming unbearable. I stood up, walked to the hallway, and that's when I saw it. There was a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, barely visible in the dim light. A person, maybe, but not quite. The shape was indistinct, like a shadow that moved with the walls. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, staring, waiting. I froze. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, like it was part of the wall itself. The whispering grew louder, the sound now coming from the direction of the figure, though I couldn't make out the words. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like the figure was holding me in place, trapping me in that moment. Finally, with every ounce of strength I had, I turned away. I ran to the door, nearly tripping over my own feet. I didn't stop to look back until I was outside, breathless and shaking. That night, I stayed in a hotel. I didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what had happened. I told myself it was just a hallucination. Maybe I was still exhausted. Maybe I had finally cracked. But when I went back to my apartment the next day, I felt it again. The silence, the weight, the whispering. But there was no figure this time. Instead, there was a message. On the wall, scrawled in what looked like dirt or something darker, "I'm here, you can't hide." I should have left then. I should have packed up and walked away, but I didn't. I stayed. For weeks, I was haunted by the whispers, the cold, the shadowy presence that seemed to follow me. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt its gaze, and the whispers would start again louder, more insistent. I couldn't tell if it was coming from outside the apartment or inside my head. It became impossible to tell where the walls ended and the darkness began. One night, I found a letter slid under my door. There was no return address, no name, just a single sentence, written in the same scrawl I had seen on the wall. "I'm closer than you think." I left that night. I didn't even take anything with me. I didn't even care. The apartment was still there, waiting, but I couldn't go back. Something inside me knew it was no longer my place. It never had been. I've been staying in different places ever since, never staying for long. But wherever I go, the whispers follow. They're always there, just out of reach, just behind me, like a shadow I can't escape. I don't know if I'll ever truly be free of it. I don't know if it's real or if I've just lost my mind. But I do know this: I'm never alone anymore, and it's always getting closer. I'm not sure how long I've been awake. The days blur together now, a thick fog that clouds everything. But I need to tell someone. If anyone's still out there, still listening, maybe it will help. Maybe someone will understand. Or maybe it's just me, maybe. it's just my mind breaking. It all started when I moved into that damn house. It wasn't anything special, old creaky floors, the kind of place you rent because it's cheap and you need somewhere to stay. I didn't think much of it when I signed the lease. In fact, it was exactly what I was looking for. The price was right and the location was quiet. No one around for miles, just a lonely stretch of road and a few houses scattered here and there, half dilapidated and forgotten. The first night was fine, the second night too, but the third, that's when I first heard it. At first, it was a soft sound so faint I wasn't sure if it was real. A scratching noise, like something light dragging across the floorboards in the room beneath mine. I figured it was just the house settling. Maybe a mouse, something harmless. At least that's what I told myself. But then it happened again. A few nights later, this time louder, a slow dragging sound, followed by a faint tapping, like something was knocking on the floor below me. I walked around, checked the rooms, but found nothing. I figured I was just being paranoid. Maybe the wind had gotten inside somehow. So I tried to forget about it, but it didn't stop. It came every night, around the same time just after midnight. The scraping, then the tapping, and it was always from the room below mine. I started to leave the lights on when I slept, just to feel safe. But it didn't help. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was waiting. On the fourth night, I decided I'd had enough. I went downstairs, flashlight in hand, determined to find the source of the noise. Maybe it was an animal, I thought. A rat in the walls, perhaps. Or maybe the house's strange old plumbing had something to do with it. The stairs creaked under my feet, and the darkness seemed to press in closer as I descended. I reached the bottom and stood in the hallway, straining my ears to hear the familiar sound. At first, there was nothing. I started to feel foolish. But then it came again. Scratching. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the farthest room in the hallway, the one at the very end. It had a thick wooden door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I hadn't thought much about it before, but now I was drawn to it. I stepped forward, hesitant, but the sound pushed me on. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each tap like a drumbeat echoing in my head. I reached for the doorknob. It turned easily, almost as if it was waiting for me. The door creaked open with a low groan, revealing a room covered in dust. The air felt cold unnaturally so. I scanned the room with my flashlight, but there was nothing. No furniture, no sign of anything living. Just empty space, stretching out in front of me. Then I heard it, the scratching, but it wasn't coming from the floor anymore. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. I dropped the flashlight. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe it was because of the way the sound seemed to pull at me. Maybe it was because the scratching turned into a scraping, like nails being dragged across wood. Or maybe it was the voice, the faint whisper I heard. So soft, I almost didn't believe it at first. Help me. I stood frozen. I couldn't move. The whisper came again, clear as day. And this time, it wasn't a pleat, was an order. Help me. I didn't know where the voice was coming from. It wasn't in the room, but it was inside my head, pushing me forward, making my feet move before I could think. I crawled on my hands and knees, following the sound, down to the corner of the room. There, in the farthest corner, the floorboards were different, looser, as if they had been pulled up before and replaced haphazardly. I pulled the boards up with trembling hands. I don't know why I did it. I should have stopped, but I couldn't. Underneath, there was nothing but darkness at first. Then I saw it, something buried in the dirt, something pale and thin, twisted in an unnatural position. I gasped, stumbling back as the flashlight flickered back to life. It was a hand, an arm, a body half rotted, its skin stretched thin and tight, with eyes wide open, staring at me through the gaps between the floorboards. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I could only stare. Then the voice came again, closer now, right behind me. "Help me." I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. No one. Just the same empty room, the same cold air, and the hand. The hand that wasn't there when I looked again. I couldn't stay. I couldn't breathe. I ran out of the room and bolted up the stairs. I didn't even bother to close the door. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me back to my room, seeping through the walls, curling into my thoughts. Every night since, I hear them scratching, tapping, whispering. They don't stop. They never stop. I moved out the next morning, packed my things in a daze. I didn't even tell the landlord about what I'd found. I don't think I could, even if I wanted to. Now I'm in a new place, trying to sleep, but the whispers are still here. They follow me wherever I go. The tapping, the scratching, always just beneath the surface, waiting. I don't know what it is, or who it is, but I think it's waiting for me to go back, or maybe it's waiting for me to help it. I'm not sure which, but I know this. Whatever was beneath that house isn't finished with me yet, and I'm afraid that one day it'll find me again. I can't sleep. I don't think I'll ever sleep again after what happened in that house. I've been avoiding talking about it, even to my closest friends, but I can't keep this inside anymore. If anything, writing it down is the only way I can make sense of it, even if it still feels unreal. I just need someone to know what happened, because I don't know how to process it. And maybe I'm not alone in this. It started when I moved into that house. It was old, certainly. Too old for the price, but it was all I could afford. It sat at the end of a quiet street, surrounded by trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. The kind of place people didn't bother to visit unless they had to. The kind of place that gets overlooked. I didn't care though. I was desperate for a place to stay. And this house, with its creaking floors and dusty windows, felt like it had room for me. The first few days were peaceful, almost too peaceful. I spent my evenings unpacking, organizing, trying to feel at home. But there was always something that kept nagging at the back of my mind. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on, just a sensation like being watched. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the quiet of the house, the loneliness. Then, on the fourth night, things changed. I was in bed, reading a book before sleep, when I heard it. A soft, creaking sound. At first, I thought it was the house settling something you'd expect from an old building. But it wasn't the usual noises. It was rhythmic, steady, as if someone or something was pacing the hallway outside my door. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing. But then it came again, a slow, deliberate creak. It was close now. Too close. I got up, heart pounding, and crept to the door, peeking out into the hallway. There was nothing there, just shadows stretching across the walls, cast by the dim light from the living room. But something wasn't right. I could feel it. The air was thick, too still, as if time had stopped. I went back to bed, but the feeling lingered. It clung to me, like a whisper in the back of my mind. I was awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sign of movement. Nothing. But even when the house fell silent again, I couldn't shake the unease. The next morning, I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe I was just adjusting to the new place. But as the days went on, the sounds became harder to ignore. At first, it was just the pacing, the slow, methodical steps that I would hear every night. Always just outside my door, always at the same time. I tried leaving the door open once to see if maybe I was imagining it, but no, there was nothing. But the sounds weren't the only thing that began to change. It was the room. I started to feel like something in the room wasn't right. It was subtle at first, shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, the temperature dropping when there was no reason for it. But one evening, it became undeniable. I was sitting in bed, reading again when I saw it, the corner of the room, just beyond the foot of my bed. The shadows in that corner were darker than the rest of the room, as if they were stretching, gathering, pulling closer to something. I couldn't look away. My eyes were drawn to it, like I couldn't stop watching. Then I saw a movementa figure, faint and indistinct. But there, standing just beyond the shadows, it wasn't human. The shape was wrong, twisted, almost like a distortion in the air itself. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt like if I blinked, it would be gone, but also like if I moved, it would notice me. I kept my eyes fixed on the spot, my breath caught in my throat. Then, it happened. A whisper. So soft, I almost didn't hear it. It came from the corner of the room, but it didn't feel like it came from any physical source. It was in my head, pressing in on me from all sides. I've been waiting. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring into the darkness. It felt like hours, though it couldn't have been. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the feeling disappeared. The room was just a room again, quiet, empty. But I couldn't shake the voice. The words echoed in my mind long after I left the room, long after I'd turned on every light and locked the doors. I tried to leave the next day. I packed a bag, ready to go, but when I reached the door, I froze. There was something wrong. The hallway was different. The walls were darker, somehow more oppressive, and the door at the end of the hall was ajar. It hadn't been before. I turned around. The house felt like it was pressing in on me, suffocating me. I couldn't leave. It was like something was holding me here, trapping me. The pacing started again that night, but this time, it wasn't just outside my door, it was inside the room with me. I could feel it, something moving around me, brushing past me in the dark. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. I could hear faint breathing, slow and deliberate. It wasn't human. I knew it wasn't. I turned on the light. There was nothing in the room, but the feeling was still there, hanging in the air like smoke. The shadows were deeper now, more defined, and there, in the corner, I saw it again, the figure, standing just beyond the edge of the light. It didn't move, it just stared at me, or I think it did. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it looking at me, watching me. I've been staying at a friend's house since then. I couldn't go back. I don't think I ever will. Every time I close my eyes, I see that corner of the room, the darkness that wasn't really darkness. I hear the whisper in my mind, always faint, always lingering. I've been waiting. I don't know what it wanted, or what it still wants, but I can feel it, even now. I don't know if it's still in that house, or if it's following me, waiting for me to go back. But whatever it is, I don't think I'll ever escape it. Not really. And that thought haunts me more than anything else.